Good afternoon. I'm excited to be sharing a subject that I've spent a lot of time studying and using for my own businesses over the last 20 years or so. So we're going to dive into interviewing techniques. We always have a great international audience. So if you want to just drop in the chat where you're calling in from, I always find that interesting. Which city around the world you're calling in from. So my name's Sean Finter. For those who haven't been with me before, I am a lifetimer in this industry, from dishwasher to bartender to manager to owner of 8 bars and restaurants. And for the last 18 years or so, I've been coaching some amazing clients around the world and helping them get unstuck and more to the point, really reach the potential of their business. So it's something I'm passionate about. My first experience with being interviewed, I was in the bar and restaurant business. I was living just north of this beautiful city, Toronto, Ontario. And actually inside that dome, that sports center, there's a Hard Rock Cafe. And I had an interview with Hard Rock, and I actually secured an interview across the street with a business. It's like a Texan style place. It's not Lone Star. I forget the name of it. But anyways, I had 2 interviews in one afternoon. So I was very nervous. I thought I would have been happy with either job. So I went ahead and applied. And I had 2 very different interview experiences. So the first was the Texan style place. And I went in there. I showed up 15 minutes before my interview. They had me wait 45 minutes past the interview time. So I was standing there waiting for an hour, very nervous, and getting nervous that I was going to miss my interview across the street. And when the manager finally called me over, he had me sit in front of him while he kept working, almost like I wasn't there. I knew immediately I didn't want to work at this place, but I needed a job. So I sat with it. He proceeded to ask me a bunch of stupid questions like, where do I see myself in 5 years? And so on and so forth. And then he just stared at me and said, he said, make me laugh. And I said, how do you mean? And he said, well, you figure it out, make me laugh. And I just got up and left. I just said, this is a joke. I said, you want me to tell you a joke? Like I've been here now for an hour and a half, and this is just not where I should be. Went across the road to Hard Rock, had an interview that changed my life. They asked me, who I spend time with outside of work. I talked about my nieces and nephews and parents and my friends and what I loved about the industry, what I found challenging, why I was attracted to the Hard Rock brand. We talked about music. We talked about the type of customers they have. And again, I knew instantly that I wanted to be there. So I was able to see the kind of black and white contrast. And I want to share with you guys today some of the framework that I've taken from there and a lot of other businesses that I've worked with over the years. And my hope for you is that you model your own new HR system as it pertains to hiring, because I believe that 30 years later, the model is still broken for a lot of businesses. Just last week, I was a customer in a restaurant and saw someone being interviewed, and I cringed. And I just thought, this is not going to work for them or anybody else. If you look at the stats from Gallup, 80% of people that leave their job believe that it wasn't a fit to begin with, right? It was just a bad hire. They were a misalignment. They needed a job. The company needed a warm body. They got together, and 2-3 weeks or 4 or 5 months later, things ended ugly. So why? Let's look at the environment for a lot of businesses. I think there's a terrible imbalance of power, right? I'm the monkey in a suit. I'm powerful. I'm strong. You're going to dance for me. If I don't like what you say or do, you're out of here, even though you're desperate for a job, right? It's a terrible dynamic. Secondly, most people are intimidated to be in an interview, and many people are intimidated to interview, right? It's just a weird, like a first date. You're sitting across a table from each other. You don't know anything about each other. It's just an odd dynamic. Interviewers often put the interviewee in a place where they feel they have to lie in order to get the job, right? What a terrible way to start a working relationship. By asking questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? I'm 51 years old now, and I don't know where I'm going to be in 5 years, right? I hope alive. I hope doing well. I hope taking care of my family, serving my clients. But beyond that, I just do not know where I'm going to be. And I think it's a weird interview question. And what happens is people interview, they say what they want to hear, and then suddenly somebody else shows up at work, and it's a weird situation all around. So we want to avoid that. And finally, a lot of people are looking for the best person. What the best person often means is someone who can overcome the shortcoming you have in your induction program, right? So the best person has experience. The best person can get running as quickly as possible. The best person has the least drag on the current management team or are already overtaxed instead of the right person for your business to serve your brand. So given all that, you can see why 80% of people fail in the interview process, because they're just terrible conditions to try to figure that out in. More to the point, if you look at a broader HR system, which I encourage you guys all to do, most are poorly designed, very few are measured, and they're rarely improved, right? They just kind of work and you kind of keep them in place. And it gets worse. So this is how I look at a business in your HR system. Do you have a systematic approach to attracting A players and repelling everyone else? Do you have a good system for filtering A players from B players from C players? We're going to talk today about your system for interviewing and really mining that goal. Do you have, your business really depends on your induction program. If you don't have a strong induction program, you're not anywhere near your profit potential. And then your ongoing development system of that talent. So again, we're going to spend the next 12 minutes or so. I'm going to give you 7 of the best hacks that I know for interviewing that will flush out that candidate for you. And make sure you jot your questions down as we go, because we're going to have 10 minutes for Q&A at the end. So number 1, I encourage you guys all to change your goal. Take some pressure off yourself from trying to find, the perfect candidate who's going to be with you for the next 10 years, to simply finding the candidate with the highest probability of completing your induction program. That's it, right? That's all you're looking to do. And your induction program, the best companies that I work with, their induction programs are between 4 months and 6 months long. Now you're working, you're there, you're part of it, people are getting paid, but you don't become a full member of that team until you graduate the induction program. And it's the final mechanism for filtering your candidates, right? I don't know a single person that I've ever met in the world of business that can absolutely select the right candidate for a business, but nobody can fake being somebody else for 4 to 6 months, right? So a typical induction program has somewhere between 50 and 80% of the people graduate that program, right? And those are pretty good numbers. So don't put pressure to think you got to have this person forever. Be honest and say, hey, we're taking this step to see if this is a good fit. And then, mapping out an induction program, something that we do. We're going to run a webinar on that specifically. Number 2, get your table stakes question. What I mean by this are there are things in your business today that I would say 4 or 5 things, situations that trip up 80% of your people, right? The reason people leave typically comes down to 4 or 5 things. Whatever it is that makes your business very difficult to work at, or these are the things that go wrong. So understanding what they are and what's most important to you, right? For me, I've got 5 questions for any person in any company that I've ever owned. And if I can't pass them on all 5 of these questions, they don't work with us. So number 1, would I have that person to dinner with my family? The answer is no, you don't work for me. Number 2, are they enthusiastic about our brand of hospitality, not hospitality in general? I like to drink at the local crab shack here. There's a nice restaurant in Annapolis, and I also like biker bars, right? Those are 3 very different brands of hospitality. Whatever it is that you're hiring for, are they enthusiastic about it? Are they a customer in that kind of business? Number 3, could you see them loving your core constituency? Right? I'm a guy who hates wearing a suit. I probably wouldn't like serving people in suits all day long. Not that there's anything wrong with suits. I just rather serve other people. Number 4, do they possess the key attributes that are not easily taught? One attribute I'll share is I only hire storytellers for front of house. People who have had a lifetime of being raised by a storyteller, who get high from telling stories. It's very difficult to teach storytelling. So I hire people who are well parented. Number 5, I ask, will this person increase the average of my team? I would never hire someone who's weaker than my weakest person, because then we're just getting weaker and weaker. So you got to figure out what your 5 questions are and stick to it as the first gate, just the table stakes. Oh, number three, the format of the interview makes or breaks it, right? Back to what I said earlier, but I'm going to give you a couple of examples. This is bullshit, right? Two people staring across the table, dance for me. No one could perform their best in that circumstance. You want to get to know someone, don't make them terribly uncomfortable, right? That should be obvious, but we do it all the time when it comes to interviewing. So, firstly, a walk and talk. If it's a first interview, a screening, I go for a walk with them, right? You don't need to be sitting down to ask 5 questions to get a feel for somebody, right? Walk through the bar, walk down the road to get a coffee. You got a park nearby, do a 15-minute loop and come back, right? Interrupt the pattern from every other interview they've had and get some exercise, right? Who wants to be sitting around all day drinking Diet Coke and interviewing? For me, I feel that a physical job is best to have a physical interview, right? If you want to see how someone performs and you've got a bar in the back, put them behind the bar. Get behind the bar with them. Get wet. Ask them questions while they make cocktails. You're interviewing 3, 4, 5 people that want to work in your kitchen. Get them in the kitchen. Put 5 cutting boards out, right? Walk and talk. Get physical. Get into it rather than sit. Put a chef across you at the table. God knows if you're ever going to be able to tell what they're like. And then group interviews. This would be a whole nother call, but group interviews changed my life. I'll give you one tip with group interviews. The words coming out of their mouth really didn't matter much to me in that setting. I was looking for one thing in particular. Is the person that you're looking at listening to the person who's talking? And are they looking to lift them up or push them down? Right? I wanted people who were secure, who were genuinely interested in someone else's story, and were looking to lift them up. Right? Even if they thought there was only one job and there's 4 of them there today. The best people I've hired could never put somebody down in that setting. It's just not in their nature, which meant that they, when the shit hit the fan, they're working for me. They had that same mentality to lift others up. Number 4, ask better questions. If you want better answers, ask better questions. These are the 3 things that matter most to me when I'm interviewing someone: their character, their alignment with our business values, and then the business environment. You could have 2 of these 3 circles right, and the third will always bring it down. For example, they could have excellent character, alignment with your values, but they just don't do well in your type of business environment, the way your managers lead the business, the way that the pace of the shift, all the factors that go in. So make sure you know what you're asking and develop an interview scorecard. Typically mine were 5 character, 5 core value, and 5 business environment. And we create a score around that. If you want any examples, just put examples in the chat of whatever you want and we'll get it out to you. And make sure you ask questions that you want to hear the answer to that are going to tell you something interesting. So, tell me about the toughest boss you've ever worked for. And then they'll start to tell you about a real scenario. They'll storytell with you and start to give you examples of what sucks and if they're describing you, it's not a good fit. And if the person they're describing really drives you crazy as well, you might have some alignment there. But, asking stupid questions like, tell me the thing you like least about yourself or the thing you need to improve, you're just putting somebody on the spot and you're asking them to come up with a bullshit answer. Ask them real questions about the real world and about who they really are, and you're going to get way better answers. Number 5, interview sequence. This is it. If you take nothing from today except this is going to change the game for you. So number 1, every resume or application form, and I'm not big on resumes in the bar industry. They're mostly bullshit, boilerplate. So I'd rather have a short application form with 3 to 5 questions. But each one of those was handed in the store in person, off-peak hours. Someone might say, what are off-peak hours? Do some research, right? Ask somebody. I want to find people that are bright enough to figure out peak versus off-peak. Don't come in when our hair is on fire, basically, right? And why do I want them to come into the store? Well, it's the first screening, right? You've met someone who's walked up to you, had a 2-minute conversation with you, and you've automatically had one of 2 reactions. Wow, this person's amazing. I'd love to have them on the team. Or 2, holy shit, this person seems like a psychopath. I'm glad we had this screening process. So what we do is we have 3 different folders that we're putting those resumes into. First one is the 110 file. You know what happens when you connect the two ones? It's a no. I've been caught before writing no on someone's resume and having them come back in. They forgot their keys and it broke their heart. So I just choose the 110 file now. We send out every person, we send out a thank you note for applying. We send out gift certificates because I realize when you're interviewing hundreds of people a year, these are also your customers in some cases. 210 was not right now. Went into our nurture file. Said, hey, we don't have something for you right now, but we liked you. And if it's okay with you, we'd like to keep you on our list and send you information on a regular basis and alert you when something does come available. And then number 3, or the 310 pile, was they got into an interview. So if they came in for an interview, 2 steps to that first 30-minute interview. The first, and I got this from Zappos, we made sure that they sat in front of our day bartender for at least 10 minutes. Why is that? We want them to talk to the day bartender. Are they interested in the job? Are they interested in the business? Do they seem like a nice person when they're not being interviewed, right? This is the real them. We had people come in being rude to their significant other on the phone, playing around on the internet, messing around, talking shit about people down the bar, right? They didn't know it, but the interview was over right then. Zappos does the same thing with their van driver, picks you up from the airport. A lot of people that go and interview at Zappos, the interview is over before they step foot in the business because they've made a fool of themselves in front of the driver. In this case, it's the day bartender. And then the first interview is really just the screening, looking for red flags, all right, or a super great fit, right? We're looking for the opposite poles before we do the in-depth interview. But our focus is typically hospitality, what it means to us and how it goes wrong, what our guests are like. We show them reviews, complaints, and then the pitfalls. We give them the 5 things that most people, that when people have left our business, that they complained about, or why they told us it was really hard to work for us. Why do we do that? No sense bullshitting these people. They're looking to work somewhere. They're going to find out anyways. So this is that screening interview. And it's up to 25 minutes, but it doesn't even have to take that long. And then the step 3, we always have 2 people, member of the management team, and a department lead goes and interviews. So if I'm hiring bartenders, I've got a member of the management team and a bartender. Why do we have a bartender? Well, they can answer all the questions about bartending. They're also going to be working with this person, right? So they're going to get a feel, they're going to give their opinion on them. And what we do is we score them separately. Those 2 people are scoring, and then they compare notes afterwards. This also refines the interview process, right? You're kind of saying, well, I think you're a little harsh there because of this. I scored them an 8. You've given them a 6. Here's why I think, the disparity exists. Number 6, this is really important. The interviewer has to go first. If you want someone to be deep and meaningful at an interview, you got to do it yourself. If you're asking them, what they dislike about the industry, tell them what you dislike. Be really honest with them. The deeper you go, the deeper they're going to go, right? They're going to get permission to tell the truth and be honest. And it's really important that someone, interviewing, realize the sensitivity of it, right? Have someone with some compassion, someone with some courage, and to make it a less unpleasant experience than it can tend to be for a lot of people. Finally, number 7. Now, if I'm interviewing someone and I have their resume beside me, what I'm doing with them is I'm asking these questions about, what they're like in the heat of the moment, or dealing with conflict with a staff member, or really difficult guest, and how did you handle it? Now, keep in mind, any name on a resume, if someone they've golfed with or hung out with, like, you're not putting a name on a resume as a reference of a person who doesn't like you. So what I often do is I'll say to them, hey, tell me, you mentioned here that Michael Smith was the AGM at the place. Who is the bar supervisor? Oh, that was Samantha Phillips. Okay, cool. What about over here? Who is this? And who worked with them? Thread of reference check just says at the end, say, hey, listen, the one concern that I have is what you said about X. And I want to go a little bit deeper on that. And my question for you is, would Samantha Phillips say that you handled this really well? And some people, you just see their face go white. I'm not trying to trip them up, but I'm saying, hey, I'm going to be calling anyways. And I'm not going to be calling to speak to the person you put for me here, unless I have to. That's the only person I can get a hold of. I want to talk to somebody that's going to be real with me, because I'm trying to find the best fit for you and for me. I don't want you to come into an arduous induction program and spend 2-3 months of your life only to be ejected, right? So I'm just trying to find out, if you're the right fit for the business. So that's TORC, threat of reference check. And it works really, really well. So I'm just scoring that resume as I go through. All right, I'm ready for questions. If you've got them, while you're doing that, we have another webinar next week, actually, a course and a book that I'm writing right now. I just toured Europe, and I'm doing a follow-up for them, and you guys are invited as well. It's one of my favorite programs. It's a game changer for any business. So that's next week. And then the week after that is the induct part, the induction program. So that's that. Ali, we get some questions?
Hey, if anybody has any questions, you can take yourself off of mute, or you can feel free to put it in the chat. There is one question that someone messaged me. How many people do you recommend? You mentioned doing group interviews. How many people max would you recommend in those before they get out of control?
So group interviews are the best leverage of your time. This might sound crazy, but as we got good at them, we set them up like mini dinner parties or lunch parties. So the answer to the question is, how many is too many in that circle? We had 4 or 5 candidates, member of the leadership team, and a representative from that department, right? So now we're up to 6 or 7 people around a table. We would have food, not a massive meal or anything, but light snack or whatever it might be, non-alcoholic beverages with that, and kind of make it fun and interesting, and run it a tight structure, make sure everyone's getting equal time, putting questions on the table, so on and so forth. I'll tell you how amazing this is. If we did this during the day before one of the bars or restaurants opened, and the chairs are all marked, right? This is seat 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You'd be at that table with them for 55 minutes. And the person setting up, we had a whiteboard in the back at one of the restaurants, would write on the board 3 and 5 and circle them. And then I'd come in the back or before I get in the back, they would say, which candidates are you going to bring back for next step interviews? And I would say 3 and 5. They'd open the door and they'd show me on the board. This is a person not in the interview. They're just walking by, setting up the restaurant. Because if you get people in the right state, you can feel their energy, you can see how they're handling the crowd, and we could teach anyone how to set up the restaurant, make cocktails, represent our menu. But when you have great people in your midst, it was pretty obvious.
All right. What is the best practice for pre-screening applications?
Pre-screening applications. So what I mentioned was having them handed into you is the best practice. The application, or the resume itself, or the application, we didn't put a lot of weight into it. Anyone who knows me knows I'm severely dyslexic. Like I can't write anything. So, what I can write and what I can deliver on the floor of your restaurant are 2 very different things. So, it came down to, do you have the tenacity to come into our store off hours, make eye contact with our leadership team, have a quick 5, 6, 7-minute chat with them. And that's how we screened. And doing that, like when I see people, we had 200 applications online. How would you know? Like maybe if you were hiring a copywriter or something like that, but if you're hiring a cook or a bartender or a barback or a dishwasher, I don't know. I have to see them. I've never been able to predict otherwise.
All right, we've got one more. Do you recommend screening through social media accounts?
Do I recommend screening through social media accounts? People do. I tell my kids, all this shit's permanent, right? You know what? The truth is that I don't. I don't know that I see it as an invasion of their privacy, but I just don't think it's for me. Now, I would be worried if somebody came to me and said, "Hey, that person you're interviewing seems like an absolute lunatic for these reasons." So, that's more of a cautionary tale for the applicant. But, the truth is, in business, just like in life, like anything can get you, right? Like, so yeah, hopefully we're not hiring people that have shocking social media accounts.
All right, we've got one more, actually two more. One, and I'll answer this real quick. Someone asked, are we going to be sending the recording out? Yes, we're going to send it out to everyone that's on this call. And the last question is from Mark, and he's asking, when you have a candidate you already feel good about outside of this process, do you still go through this process with them?
Yeah, we do 100%. And here's why. Well, how many times have you been burned, hiring someone just on a gut feel? So when you think about this process, what it's doing, and this I should tell you guys is a pretty revised version or cut down version. My process when I was running restaurants in the end became a lot more arduous for the applicant because we just had that many people applying and we never hired anyone in a hurry, right? We measured quality candidates against openings or against open positions. And we sat at nearly 20 A applicants for every position. So we had no reason to act quickly. Now, in saying that, every once in a while you get an A+ person who you know about, and you might act quicker. But the reason for this process is simple, that it has at least 5 people touching and getting a feel for the candidate. The initial screening, right? Which, by the way, in our case, we did out 80% of applicants in a 2 to 5 minute screen. Some people, just the way they walked in the restaurant, looking like they've been dragged behind a car, came in during peak hours when they were told not to, a little bit abrupt, it just like, no, we don't want to work with you. So you have the original screener, you have the day bartender, you have the next person, then you have the member of the management team and a representative of that team. So that's 5 people. And what we were committed to, that if anyone had a hell no, we backed away from that person, right? If anyone just had an interaction or something that happened, and then we looked at the scoring, right? So we got really good at it over time with the data, and the scoring only matters 6 months later and a year later, right? So when people scored high in these areas, and it turns out that it was good for us in the medium to long term. So yeah, everybody had to go through that. My neighbor's kids, I knew the kid, right? Had to go through the process because the process worked, and it also showed us that you were serious about, getting a job with us. We good, Ali? 3:30?
Yeah, we have a couple more, but what we'll do is, do you want to follow up with maybe a 5-minute video we'll attach to the webinar recording that goes out just to answer these last few questions?
We'll let people drop off now if they have to, because I never want to run over, but and then I'll answer these. I'll keep going. You guys can stay on if you like.
Okay.
But I'll knock them out quickly.
All right, very good. Let's see. Let me go backwards. So I don't miss anybody. There's a couple of them here. When you have a candidate, oh no, I read that one. Do you rigidly stick to specific questions, or do you adjust based on how the interview is going?
We absolutely adjust to how the interview is going. However, the way I lay out the scorecards, the interviewer is responsible for giving a score for that section. So if you didn't use all 5 questions, that's fine. If you can get what you need from that interviewee, from the questions that you're asking and the path that you're on, awesome. But you have to represent a score for that person. And again, the scoring matters. When you keep that file and you watch that person over time, you're going to see, if you're asking the right questions to begin with, if those questions actually matter. But, the short answer is, I feel the best interviews are, much more conversational, that someone's in control of the conversation, right? The interviewer, it's not a meandering going nowhere, but you should be able to adapt on the fly and go deeper into areas, if you think there's a real strength there or if you think there's a weakness there.
Okay. How long would you generally interview people for? And there's a follow-up to that, so I'll let you answer the first part.
So I laid out in here the timings. Basically, the first interview is that 5-minute screening, 2 to 5 minute screening. Second interview is 30 minutes or less. And people might ask, can you do that in Zoom or whatever else? Sometimes, if that makes sense. But I ran restaurants that were brick and mortar, like not food trucks so if you couldn't get into my store for an interview, it'd make me question if you can get in for your 18th shift. Right now, I do realize some people might be coming from another city and moving to town, so there's reasons. But second interview is up to 30 minutes, and then the next series of interviews are up to an hour. I know people have had 75 minute, 90. I just think it's too long. I think between 30 and 55 minutes. If you can't ask the right questions at the right pace and get the information that you need, and with us, we interviewed a lot of people because we were always refining the system. So I also didn't want to have my managers, inundated in 90-minute interviews.
So that parlays into the next question, which is, if you're scheduling several in a day, how do you schedule yourself so you don't lose your mind?
Yeah, so that depends, right? Like, I'll answer it this way. Two of my best leaders in my restaurant group in Sydney, like my two top people, and I don't mean in the hierarchy of the company, I just mean the two most effective leaders that I had. One of them hated interviewing, and by hated, it took away her energy. And the other guy actually really enjoyed it because he really believed he was looking for the right person, the right fit. He was helping our business, he was helping them. And if he couldn't give them a fit, he was going to give them some advice on how to get on somewhere else. Right. So the person that loved interviews could do 3 or 4 in a row and time block that in. And this is why we did so many group interviews, because you could do 5 people in one go. But if we were doing individuals, he could do 3, 4, 5 in a row, where she could only do 2. And if she did more than 2, it was just too much for her. And it just, she could absolutely do it, but it just kind of compromised her day. And that's the other thing. Like, you want to get your team up with experience in interviewing, but go with your A players. Like, people that enjoyed interviewing for my group did more interviewing, right? It's not everyone's thing. And some people enjoy it. And if they enjoy it and are really good at it, let them handle the lion's share.
All right. What is your recommendation for interview that's not going well? How do you end it kindly? Or do you sit through the whole thing? And
oh no, I never sit through the whole thing. Once I get to, well, let me just say that everyone's got to be true to their own personality, right? Like, and when I have an interview that's not going well, A, I know I'm not hiring this person, and B, I know to be false with them is not serving them either, right? So if someone said something outrageous, or it just wasn't going well, I would say, hey, you know what? I have all I need for today. We're not going to be going ahead with you. And I'm more than happy to share why and offer you some advice. I'm also more than happy just to, get you a drink and shake hands. And 9 out of 10 people will say, I'd love to know what happened. And it sucks, but I'll tell them, right? Because one interview experience I had in London, I didn't get hired at a place I really wanted to get onto. And it really ate away at me. And 2 or 3 years later, I went back. I knew the guy who was running the place. And I said, I got to ask you, why didn't I get hired? And he told me, and he said, hey, you showed up here, you were, jeans, you were all sweaty because I was rollerblading. He didn't know that. And he's like, you just didn't present yourself well. And had he told me that, I probably wouldn't have rollerbladed in my next 5 interviews, right? So I just think it's fair and to be honest with people. Having said that, some people have told me to go fuck myself, and that's fine too. This won't be the last time, but I just think that's the right thing to do.
all right. Can you elaborate on the scoring? Was it specific to each venue?
Yeah, the scoring, when it comes to the business environment side of it, certainly is, right? And it's a really good question, because my top bartender, Tanya, would work at the place she worked at, and she'd crush it across the road at our other place. And one day I asked her to go down to another bar that we had, which is very similar in my mind to the one that she worked at. It turned out she went down and did it. Everyone loved her, customers, the staff, the management. She came back and she said, Sean, do me a favor and never make me go there again. I hated it. I said, why? The way the managers managed. She didn't like the customer. She didn't like the product list. She didn't like anything about it. And I can tell you, A players have a choice in where they work, right? C players will have to work anywhere they're lucky enough to get a job. So yeah, on that form, we're trying to identify the environment that they're going to be working in, right? Like a simple question, like I had one bar that it was only open 4 nights a week, but it was like New Year's Eve, 4 nights in a row, every single week. And for some people, that's amazing. That's the best thing they could ask for. For Tanya, that was awful. She also didn't like a quiet place. She liked somewhere in the middle. She didn't like a person micromanaging her. You know what I mean? So that's what we're trying to score off to understand like what that environment's like. And when you tie the questions to that in the past, like tell me about this, and then how did you feel about that? And they'll give you the answers that you need. Now, when it comes to their character and our values, that was pretty universal across the board, right? Most of my team, I had almost 400 staff. Most of them got along with each other, right? Because they were a very similar, cut from this very similar cloth. The business environment, though, was very different.
All right. Okay. Greg is asking, these days, there are not as many applicants as there used to be, and the ones that are there have less experience, so we don't have as deep or diverse of a pool of candidates. Any advice on this? He says, I imagine most of the candidates wouldn't pass such a layered system, but at the end of the day, we need bodies to work.
Yeah. So I'll give you one of my secrets. I had a recruiting team that went out and recruited staff for me. I had 396 recruiters, 396 staff, and they were all recruiting more staff. Not all of them, but they were all incentivized to do so. They were all secure in their own jobs because I made them secure. I helped them understand their ranking and how important they were and everything else. So of the people we hired, now I'll say if you have people recruiting for your business, right back then, the numbers are different than today. But back then, if a person that you recommended to our business came in for an interview and they were granted an interview, so they got past the screening, so not the screening, but they got sat down for an interview, you got $500. If they made it through the induction program, they got $1,500. Now, in today's dollars, that'd probably be 1,000 and 2,500 or something like that. But for $3,000 for an amazing employee, that mattered to us. But when we look back at the stats in the last 24 months that I had my restaurant group, less than 20%, I think it was 17 or 18% of the people we hired for the front of house had industry experience. Now, they might have had retail experience, but not hospitality, not bar and restaurant experience. And of our back of house, that number was around 50%. Right. So I just said, hey, we can teach you to cook. I didn't have fine dining restaurants. I could teach someone how to make a steak and burgers and everything else. You're going to start washing dishes. So I can certainly teach you how to do that. In the front of house, I'd say to people, I was the number one recruiter. I'd see a person working at a gas station when he didn't have to come around to me and say, hey, your tire looks a little low, or, ask me about something, and I'd say, hey, have you ever thought about working in a bar? And he's like, I don't know. I don't know that I have to look for it, or I've never been given the opportunity. I said, man, we could teach you. I said, if you come on with me in 6 months' time, you could be one of the top staff in the city. You'd have to start collecting glasses and doing that. It could take you a year or 18 months, but in 18 months from now, you're going to be 18 months older. And then I was able to say, like, if you come in, you can talk to the staff about what they earn, because our people earn a decent wage, plus they made tips, and it was always more than what a kid at the gas station or a grocery store or a hardware store or wherever was earning. So I went out and created my own marketplace because we had a kick-ass recruitment program and a kick-ass induction program. And I had more people, me telling you I had 20 qualified people for every opening. The people that ran the bars and restaurants across the street said, you can't get good people anymore. I just need warm bodies in here. I just generated my own system and loved it. I love teaching hospitality. And I love giving those people opportunities to be a part of something. They went from working at a gas station to working on an award-winning team that made good money, that, invested in each other. Anything else, Sally?
All right, last one.
All right.
When you say refining the systems, do you mean hiring more qualified and aligned candidates? If so, how do you move those that are no longer aligned with the refined system?
Yeah, so this is I'll give you the short version because this could be a whole half an hour call itself. So a few things. Number one of our values was a commitment to excellence and to growth. Right? I want to try to be an excellent human being and I want to grow as a human being. So why wouldn't I want my business to do the same? Every single person in my company on the anniversary they were with us or thereabout that week or in that month, they had their re-up meeting, myself included. And it said, here are our values, here's our mission, here's our current goals. Are you absolutely up for accomplishing this? So we basically offered 1 year employment at a time, including to the founder. Right. And the day you said you couldn't, didn't mean you were fired, didn't mean you had to leave, just means you're on your way out at some point. And I always said to them, I'd rather help you get an awesome job somewhere else. Like if you just lost it with us, or you moved, you're in the middle of a divorce, you just don't have the focus for a company that's as intense as we were. I get it, and let me help you transition to the next place. Secondly, we ranked everybody that worked in our company by department every year, or sorry, every 16 weeks. In that evaluation, you were told where you stand in your collective group, right? So if I'm a cook, I'm in a group of cooks. If I'm a bartender, I'm in a group of bartenders. And you were told if you were in the top 20, middle 60, or bottom 20. Bottom 20 is only comfortable for new employees who all have to start there. But if you've been put in the bottom 20 and you're in there 2 trimesters in a row, our theory is up or out, right? I don't believe in keeping people who are struggling, who are, we're there to make the weak stronger, but people that choose not to grow and not to get stronger, you're not going to do well working for me. And I have helped a lot of people. I always say I've never fired anybody, but I've freed up an awful lot of futures. So I've helped people understand that, being the bottom 20 with me in a difficult restaurant group to work with might mean that you're a B player across the street and you could be an A player down the road. And I know that humans are happier where they're doing better. And if we feel you're not going to get to the next level with us, then why would we, our A players don't want to work with C players and our customers don't want to be served by C players. Right. And it's part of the danger of a group that's constantly progressing is, you're constantly progressing and the average keeps getting higher, but our bottom kept getting, cleared out. Systems wise, we looked at our scoring twice a year. So our current systems and our whole HR system and said, how could we improve this? What questions need to change? Let's look at the scoring of the people we took on and how well they're doing now. And then those people get scored every trimester against their direct report, 2 blind peer members, and then our rating system. We had a tangible, intangible system. So you got a score, and that score wasn't finite. You could argue it. You could talk to us about it, and we could adjust it if it needed to be. Something was up. But for the most part, you kind of landed where you landed. And then we refined our systems from there. Running restaurants for me, guys, was like my high school, college, university, and masters all came from the bar business. I'm just trying to give it back to people, saying you can improve and grow and learn these business systems here and become a better person as a result. All right. So my restaurants and bars were not a place to go to take the rest of the year off. You had to keep developing. All right. Well, we're going to leave it there. Guys, I appreciate you guys joining. Make sure you come back. And in Doc, that's at 2 weeks, but this is next week. For those that haven't been through this course, 1 single page that'll change your business. And then this is my favorite of the whole HR program. When I go and look at a new client's business, I can tell how well they're doing or not doing by looking at their induction program. Most people don't really have one. They just say, here's the cash register, here's the people you're going to be working with. I'll show you how to make it easy and fun and useful. So with that, I'll see you guys next week. Thanks for joining.